Hey guys, how you doing? In today's video, we're going to talk about how to use Leetcode effectively. So why would you want to use Leetcode, and what is Leetcode? So Leetcode is essentially a website for programmers to practice, share, and discuss programming interview questions. So that seems to be a big sticking point for a lot of developers when they switch jobs or make a career change is the actual programming interview, whether it be on a whiteboard, on a Google Doc, a shared coding environment, or shared IDE. A lot of people have been rusty on the actual data structures, algorithms, and computer science fundamentals that are needed a lot of the times on your job. So when we do our job, typically we work on features and products where we don't often see those algorithms, but the reason companies use these types of programming interview questions is because they want to make sure you know how to effectively communicate, know how to solve fundamental or basic computer science problems. So basically, do you know your stuff? Are you actually an engineer, a good programmer? Also, how you write your code, because even though it's not a perfect one-to-one approximation, how you write your code on the whiteboard or the shared Google Doc or wherever you're coding is often how you're going to be thinking about the way you code and how you'll be coding in general. Again, it's not perfect, but it's also a good barrier or obstacle that companies like to use to show how dedicated, what type of programmer you are, and then how you solve problems. And also, let's say that your fundamentals aren't great. This is a great way to show, hey, you put in the effort to study these types of problems and to solve them. So overall, the great thing about using Leetcode and what you're going to get from this is how to more effectively solve these interview problems and Leetcode problems, how to basically improve your skills, and then how to prepare for these coding interviews as well. You can use it as a form of practice. So let's say you're on a sports team, you would be doing layups, you would be doing running drills. Leetcode and other websites like it, where they basically have a bank or repository of programming questions, is a great way to practice every day. Actually, a good habit I've been getting into is answering 2 questions, or roughly do an hour of Leetcode in the morning. Keeps my skills fresh. One important thing to mention is that Leetcode is just one out of many tools you could use to prepare for a coding interview. You could use books, websites, free, paid. Leetcode is just a great way where they have done a great thing where they've combined thousands of programming questions under specific categories, and it's easy to kind of track your progress. One of the things that I would advise against is solely using it to answer questions. Oftentimes in programming interviews, you're going to be answering these questions on a whiteboard without a way to know if you're using the correct method or specific built-in function for your language. You're not going to be able to do quick console logs or print statements to check if there's any errors or check what your variable is set as. Again, Leetcode is just a single tool. It has the whole question in grasp. In order to be really good at interviews, and I'll mention this in another video, you have to be asked clarifying questions. You got to understand what the inputs, outputs, and the overall goal of the problem is. So let's just look through one of these questions. Given a string S, remove the vowels I, E, I, O, and U from it and return the new string. Your interviewer might ask you this question and be vague about it. They just might ask you, I want you to remove a certain group of characters from a string. And it's your job to basically ask those clarifying questions. How big is this group of characters you want me to remove? Are you more concerned about space complexity or time complexity? Because that's going to determine how you're going to answer questions. That's why it's good to actually practice these questions on the whiteboard. For example, you take this question and just write out your logic. First, you're going to answer those questions. What are the inputs? What are the outputs? What's the goal of the question? Should I ask any clarifying questions? For example, for this I, E, O, I, O, U, you can ask, should I formulate this function or solution to also accept any additional characters you want me to remove, or just solely focused on these characters. But a great thing about this resource with Leetcode is you can easily find out from the community if your solution was close. One thing that lacks for Leetcode is you don't necessarily know from your specific solution to this question if the space-time complexity of your question. You just have to have fundamental analysis for these types of problems. Of course, you can go through discuss and find out the answer and what other people are answering. You have the solution right here, but again, it doesn't have space-time. A lot of other answers do, but that's just a fundamental you're going to have. So for example, if you're using for loops, you're at least going to have on time complexity for that problem. If you have a double for loop, it's often going to be an squared time complexity. So you're going to learn a lot of those fundamentals from reading books, data structures, algorithms, or there's a book called Cracking the Code Interview by Gail McDonald, I think. I forgot her middle name. Great book. It teaches a lot of good fundamentals. But Leetcode is really good for just getting this constant practice to allow yourself to answer these questions. And through the discuss section, you can actually find out other people's submissions. And not for this one, but you can also see the solution and what the author said about how they solved the problem. So oftentimes they'll give you around 1 to 3 approaches on how to solve the problem, and different space-time complexities as well. So that's just good practice to review that after you answer the question or after you give them 20 minutes to try to answer a question. So one very important thing with Leetcode and how to effectively use it is, and how I do it too, for these easy medium questions, try between 20 and 30 minutes just to solve it yourself. Don't look anything up. Really try to go through, I wouldn't say adversity, but just focus on the problem, because it's going to build your tolerance to solve these types of problems when you run into these, not stumbling blocks, but these areas where you don't automatically know the answer. It's going to make your logical reasoning and problem solving ability better. And when you encounter that in an actual whiteboard interview, on-site interview, or phone screen interview, even if you run into a problem, you'll be calm because you had the practice on Leetcode. So again, focus on doing 20-30 minutes of trying to answer these questions by yourself, and then look at the answer, understanding the fundamentals. And a great way to kind of solidify these fundamentals when you look at the answer is try to deviate or experiment with the actual problem. So this problem will remove vowels from a string. Try to also include a variation to it. So I want you to remove these characters and these numbers, or I want you to be able to constantly expand that hash map or dictionary with this question. You have to use that in the solution. Or some simple things like, okay, you answer this question recursively, now I want you to do it iteratively. Because when you answer these questions with these little variations, that's how it's going to be structured in a normal interview. So your interviewer might ask you, hey, okay, you solved this problem, I also want you to add this constraint or this additional feature I want you to do with this problem. So let's say you have to sort an array. The interview asks you to sort an array, and you do it appropriately. Then they ask you, okay, can you do that? I see that you've done it in O(n) time. Can you now do it in O log n time? You want to be able to understand what they're saying and be able to do it appropriately. And by doing these variations with these Leetcode problems, you're going to build up those fundamentals to handle those deviations and variations to the problem. So again, use Leetcode effectively by understanding the ultimate goal, which is to either improve your skills or get better at interview problems. And in order to get better at interview problems, you have to be able to ask these clarifying questions, understand that your interview is going to ask you for variations on any different type of category. Okay, I see you did this space-time complexity. Now this solution requires it to be done faster with no regards to space. That's going to change your solution. So be able to handle those variations in general. One other quick point I want to mention, let's say that you're having a difficult time just answering easy questions. What I also recommend is when you're first starting out with Leetcode, maybe you're a self-taught developer or a new computer science student, go to these easy questions, just try to answer as many as possible. Get those quick wins because it's going to make you feel a lot better. It builds your confidence up. But let's say that you're just having a difficult time trying to answer even one. What I would recommend is whatever problem you choose, just really understand the solutions provided to you when you look at those answers. And if you don't understand anything, just break it down piece by piece. Okay, I don't understand this word recursion. Let me look up look it up on either article or Wikipedia, and then you'll slowly be able to build up that dictionary of patterns that pop up in programming. And then just retry that problem that you weren't able to answer with the solution you remembered, and then again try to add those variations, because that's going to build that pattern seeking part of your brain, and also how to handle those variations as well. Also, I'm not sure how new this feature is, but I really like this feature, mock interview. Code uses a lot of the same questions they have in their programming interview code bank, but they categorize it by how often they're shown at particular companies. So let's say you're interviewing for Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, etc. I think this is a great way to practice, because they have a timer and assessment of your performance on these questions. So let's say you're preparing for a phone interview. Just do for a particular company, just do all the phone interview problem sets for that particular company, or just a range of companies, because you're going to be more comfortable by adding those artificial constraints. So adding artificial constraints is great, because you're replicating or simulating a real life environment for when you're going to be interviewed for a programming job. And the more you can replicate it, the better you're going to do when you're in that actual situation. You have a constraint you can easily see. So let's say you have 3 problems, an hour, have to answer it. That's great, because you can basically strategize how you're going to answer. Okay, I have 3 questions, 90-minute total time, so I have to be able to answer each question in 30 minutes. Okay, so let's say you're going slow on one question. You can be very strategic about how you answer this, and by simulating those conditions, you can do a lot better as well. So yeah, try out this mock interview section. It's great. I think it really gets you in the right mindset when you're in preparing for these programming interviews, and it's a great tool as well. So use a combination of these problems mock interview features on Leetcode, and I think you should be prepared. Just remember, on the actual interview, you're going to have to ask clarifying questions. You should be writing out pseudocode, basically just high-level overview of your logical steps, not actually writing code. Then you write code, and you make sure that when you're practicing, you're adding these variations too. Finally, make sure that you're not just practicing coding on the IDE or coding environment provided by Leetcode, but also on a whiteboard, using pen and paper, Google Docs, because you're not going to be able to have like the syntax highlighting or a lot of the modern features of IDE when you're coding. They want to make sure that you know the language that you're coding in very well, and then that you're writing bug-free code without the help of a tool like a IDE or code editor. So again, Leetcode is a great tool. They have a free version and a lot of free questions. Try to answer a couple of that. And then finally, you can discuss how your interviews are going, and then also questions, and get feedback from the community as well. So overall, Leetcode is a great tool, but just remember, it's one tool out of many. And you also want to be practicing every day, and with the other tools such as the books, textbooks, and online resources. Just make sure, if you don't understand some of the fundamentals from the questions that Leetcode is asking, just break down that question and the underlying principles or topics that it's going after. And I'll just kind of quickly show you. So let's say you pick on a problem, you can find out what category it's in. So the topics: array, dynamic programming, string, tree, math, hash table. So let's say that you go through a couple hash table questions and you're not really understanding it. Okay, that's a good indicator. Time to learn a little bit more deeply about hash tables. So overall, Leetcode's a great tool to use in order to prepare for interviews. Just remember that you always want to add some artificial constraints or variations in order to simulate a real interviewing environment. Practice every day if you can, because it's going to build your skills and fundamental understanding of data structures and algorithms. And also make sure to use other tools as well. But hope this helped. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to include a video on how to answer an interview problem. So basically, the structure on how to clarify your questions, make sure you're understanding the inputs and outputs and the overall goal, and actually answer it in a way that you're displaying to the interviewer how you're understanding the problem, how you communicate, and how you are most likely to code. Anyways, hope you have a great day, and see you in the next video. Cheers.